Live from the Washington DC area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. The future of humanity hanging on a silver thread, or is it? One could think so, according to media, climate change proponents, and climate change deniers alike. Party on the left and party on the right. Socialists on the one hand and capitalists on the other. Progressives on the one hand and traditionalists on the other. Good evening and welcome on Smart Sustainability. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. Thanks for joining us tonight. Media and internet are full of it. Armageddon, apocalypse, crash, collapse, end of democracy, end of humanity, loss, grief, fear, death, etc., etc., depending on what you watch and who you listen to.
The Earth's climate is far more fragile than people think. It's subject to radical shifts that can be so quick and extreme that it can change the course of history.
I think that could be the end of our democracy, not to be too pointed about it, but I want people to understand that this is a make or break point.
They all have their own spin. It's catastrophic. If you could do that, you're guilty, we're being told. If you don't do that, the demise of humanity is your fault as well. And on it goes, blah, blah, blah. It plays with our emotions and imaginations, big screen a la Hollywood, right in your home, on your phone, television, or iPad. Manipulation is at an all-time high from all sides. One thing they all have in common. The fear-mongering, though, is the same, independent of who you listen to. The far left, the far right, and even in the spectrum in between. I think we're missing the boat on what's really happening and where our chances lie. So tonight, I want to invite you to explore with me what's fear-mongering, what can be attributed to collective Stockholm syndrome that we all seem to have, what's real, and what are our options. See, we've been so used to thinking in the same dimension and in the same paradigm, that is to say, old thought habits as a result of how we've lived our lives and been influenced in the past 100 years. And don't believe for a minute that traditional or progressive are different thought patterns. In essence, they're not. Yes, I know, it sounds heretic, but they're both anchored in the same paradigm, a two-dimensional physical view of what is, leaving out the various planes of the manifestation process. And the manifestation process is law. That's the static component of the universe.
Well, of course, results don't just happen. People are just falling short in a couple of areas. And he pointed out that we're only limited by weakness of attention and poverty of imagination. In other words, we've got to stay focused and we've got to use our imagination to build the kind of world we really want.
Everything else is dynamic, within universal, natural, one could say divine law and legalities that are present in every living being, no exception. In absence of understanding and consciously living that, what we really are, creative source energy in a physical body equipped with imagining and creating new worlds in a blink of an eye with our minds and feelings if we learn how to do it, we tend to see things from exactly the same dimensional perspective on opposite ends of the aisle. That's what's commonly called reality. Reality can be interpreted in different ways, but it's still a focus on a physical outcome in a two-dimensional approach. Analog to looking at disease from a purely symptomatic physical perspective without understanding what else goes on in there. Currently, we all seem to be looking through the rearview mirror and try to determine to see what's ahead. You see how ridiculous this is? Have you ever tried that? Well, how did that go? There is no question that where we are today, we collectively around the globe are in trouble. We, meaning all of us, the people. Old collaborations are falling apart. more uncontrollable factors with nations becoming more hostile and people losing the ability to talk or even try to understand another's point of view, rising conflict, climate disasters, and the economy, as we know, on track of completely faltering. Add to that the increasing absurdity of the media, and social media included, using the old mass manipulation playbook, which really goes back to Hayes and Goebbels. And you see why, at this point, everyone is confusing everyone and everything. Algorithms amplify that. They live off polarity. And while political can impact short-term, long-term, though, it can't. Remember the famous Einstein quote, "Madness is doing the same thing all over again and expect a different result"? That's when things keep playing out in the same paradigm. One day this party's on top, another day that one's on top. The wheel goes on and on the same way. It's like shifting one stack of papers to another side of the room and calling it change. Well, that's not change, it's a reshuffle.
I'm gonna kick that football clear to the moon! Isn't it peculiar, Charlie Brown, how some traditions just slowly fade away?
Breaking the wheel, though, is different. That's the big calling of our time. On an individual level, understanding who each of us is at the soul, understanding the power we have in us, understanding that everything in life is about your relationship to yourself and that's mirrored to the outside, not someone else. That determines reality, the physical outcome. So even if there are many different approaches and many different paths that lead to that, tonight we focus on what some of those different approaches can be and how much you really are in charge. With a diverse group of guests from Israel, Chile, Russia, Ukraine, and North America, and contrary to what normal talks do, focus on conflict from a who's right and who's wrong perspective, I want to invite everyone to stretch our minds a bit this evening and look at what's happening from an ecological, environmental, psychological, economic, and spiritual point of view. To get back to Einstein, physical matter is condensed energy that is lowered so much in frequency so our eyes can see it. We have fallen so far into the material that we can't see that part, which is immaterial, higher frequency energy, the vital part in anything that manifests. Anything we see in the physical was thought first. That includes actually many things that are going on around the globe. So what more people seem to be a little bit more comfortable with nowadays is that there is a correlation between physical, mental, and emotional. Well, after all, that's a start. The same applies to the world in turmoil we're in. Even that was once a thought. So let's look at different perspectives from ecological, economic, psychological, and spiritual point of views with a number of guests. Join me in welcoming Elizabeta Kromova, and I hope I pronounced the name right, a geologist and geophysicist with a master's degree from Moscow State University with advanced geophysics coursework from or in the United States. She works as a geophysicist for French conglomerate Schlumberger in Russia, focusing on monitoring global natural disasters and analyzing seismic volcanic activity as well as changes in geodynamics and geophysics. Yeah, the stuff we all know about and want to know about, right? Paulina Herrera Mesa, psychologist from Chile. She got her degree from American University, who's going to talk with us about the psychological state we're in and impact. Anna Koteljar, geologist with a master's in ecology from Southern Federal University. She's based in Israel and monitors for the Creative Society data gathering from world ecology trends. We got Tali Skrupi. He's an IT professional originally from Ukraine, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. He works with the Creative Society on global trends, is also a frequent speaker. We also have two interpreters joining us, but you hear that right in English. We try the simultaneous interpretation tonight. It's a complicated show, but we're going to give it a try. Welcome on Smart Sustainability, all of you. I wanted to start in this very first segment with the big clash, the big issue we're seeing everywhere, and it seems really everything is coming together at the same time, building this huge Damocles sword above us. So, Anna, perhaps you can give us a trend generally in terms of sort of an overview of what are we looking at?
USA, Taiwan, Kazakhstan.
It's a true nightmare that's happened for the first time in my whole life.
Bulgaria.
It was as if a bomb had fallen.
Italy.
Who could have known that the water would rush in so fast? We lost everything.
Pakistan. Spain. China. Germany. Storms and hurricanes. Category 4 Hurricane Ian was the deadliest hurricane to hit Florida residents in the United States. Some cities were 90% destroyed by the storm surge, furious winds, and flooding. More than 1.5 million people had to leave their homes. According to preliminary estimates, the damage will exceed $100 billion. Fiona is the first Category 4 hurricane in history to move this far north. Fiona reached eastern Canada, maintaining the strength of Category 2 hurricane, and left an unprecedented path of destruction in the country. In recent years, tropical storms have begun to move further north and south from the equator. The world's megacities such as New York, Boston, Beijing, and Tokyo could soon be under their attack. Typhoon Noru was predicted to hit the Philippines as the equivalent of Category 1 hurricane. But in just 6 hours, there was an explosive intensification to a Category 5 super typhoon, with wind gusts reaching 196 miles per hour. People did not have time to prepare for the impact of the natural disaster of such force. More than 900,000 people were affected, while the damage to agriculture exceeded $52 million. In the United States, the number of convective storms, the damage of which exceeds $1 billion, is growing unprecedentedly. Between the year 2000 and 2010, there were 34 of them, and in the next 11 years, there were already 95. In the Southern Hemisphere, storm intensification over recent decades has already reached levels projected to occur in the year 2080. Abnormal precipitation and flooding. The number of abnormal precipitation events is growing all over the world. During the 9 months of 2022, more than 35,000 daily records have been registered across the planet. Sudden floods leave no time for people to escape. The province of Ancona, Italy, was hit by half a year's worth of rain overnight. Never before in their lives have the residents seen such a rapid rise of water, almost 1 meter in 10 minutes. Australia has been hit by 3 waves of historic flood in 2022. Given such frequency and intensity of flooding, it makes no sense to rebuild some cities. In South Africa, almost a year's worth of rain fell within 24 hours, resulting in one of the deadliest floods in the 21st century in the country. Just 60 years ago, there were 8 major floods per year in the world. And by 2021, this number has increased by 27 times. The monsoon season of 2022 turned into the biggest climate disaster in modern history of Pakistan. 1/3 of the country's provinces went underwater. More than 1,600 people have been killed, and 33 million have been affected by the disaster. More than half of them are children. Over 2 million houses have been destroyed. Elderly people, pregnant women, and children are forced to live outdoors in inhumane conditions. There is a lack of food, drinking water, and medical care. Contaminated water has become a source of infections. People are left without jobs, shelter, and means of livelihood. After almost 2 months, the water is still not gone. The nightmare for people continues and will only get worse. Extreme heat and drought. During the 9 months of 2022, there have been over 100,000 highest temperature records across the globe. In China, for the first time in world history, a heat wave reached 113 degrees Fahrenheit and lasted 79 days in a row. More than 900 million people were affected by extreme temperatures. Bomb shelters were opened to people as a relief from the unbearable heat. In the European Union, the death of 53,000 people in July are directly attributed to the unprecedented heat wave. In 2022, severe droughts have hit many regions. Rivers and reservoirs have dried up. Shipping has been practically brought to halt. The energy crisis has worsened. Electricity bills have soared manyfold. The drought has destroyed crops, leading to unprecedented increase in food prices. The water crisis has reached record levels. Access to safe drinking water is under threat. No country, even an economically developed one, is immune to this problem. This year, over 2 billion people on our planet are already facing water shortages. Wildfires. In Russia, there has been a sharp increase in the total area of wildfires in the last 5 years. In 2022, Alaska is experiencing the largest wildfire season in its history. 50 years ago, there were no such thing as megafires, but as of early October 2022, there have already been 16 megafires in the USA alone, and many more are approaching that scale. In Europe, for the first time since satellite observations began, the cumulative burnt area in 2022 so far exceeded 770,000 hectares, which is nearly 3 times the annual average. And in some countries, the increase in wildfires has been really shocking. In the Czech Republic, an average of 9 hectares of land is burned annually. However, by the end of September this year, the fire had already destroyed almost 1,500 hectares. This is 158 times more than the usual. Wildfires are not seasonal anymore. Now, they don't stop even in winter, and hurricane winds spread a fire at breakneck speed. In the Algerian province of Al Taref, winds of over 55 miles per hour cause the flames to spread in a matter of minutes, leaving no chance for people to escape. Fires are occurring in places where they have almost never been before. Central Europe, the rainforest of South America, and even the Arctic are burning. What was predicted for the year 2100 is already happening right before our eyes today. In 2022, there has been an unprecedented leap in the power and the amount of natural disasters, and judging by the progression, they will continue to increase at a record speed. In order for humankind to survive, urgent, extraordinary action is needed. Meanwhile, we have very little time left.
Share the information from the ecological point of view that we are facing right now in the world, and if it's possible, I will suggest to start this speech actually to Elizaveta Kromova, because very often, these days, the problem of ecology is taken as the climate problem. And this is the big mistake that it exists, because climatic processes are defined by different reasons, and it is very important to know what these reasons are. And a bit later, we will talk about ecology, has to do with the climate and our Earth.
Okay.
Да, спасибо.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed, the state of ecology right now, the state of environment is really dramatic, and the consequences of the state is basically mass jump like consumption and increase in what, like, for the past 50 years, we've used the third part of all natural resources of the planet. We catastrophically cut down the forests, and just imagine in 1 minute we cut down the forest of the size of a football field. And all these things, they might seem like separate from each other, but to be honest, like, we've polluted our ocean and stuff, but all this is just like small parts of a huge process, because all the ecosystem is interconnected, and how we treat it with consumption is the consequence of the fact that it cannot basically face what is going on and kind of like renew itself, and the planet is just not able to renew all the natural resources that we have. And just imagine that to date, the problem of natural resources is not just the fact that we're using it in a fast pace, but in the fact how we use it, how we redirect it, how we distribute it, and how rational or irrational our decisions are towards the natural resources that we have. So in order to see this difference, basically an ordinary person from a normally developed country uses around 30 tons of natural resources, and In low developed countries, it's around 2 tons. So this is a huge difference to see like what natural resources people actually have and use.
Okay,
and also
hang on a
another
second.
part is like how we as people treat things that we have, the things that we possess. And because, you know, today, statistically, around 90% of all the goods that we've bought, they are made with the help of natural resources, like water, for example, and all this is directly connected with the ecology. And 90% of everything we consume we throw away in 6 months, in the next 6 months. So this disbalance that exists right now, what we take out of the planet with a very fast pace and, you know, basically produce it into trash, cannot be renewed. And this paradox exists right now in the world and takes, you know, catastrophic pace. And around 2 billion of trash we throw away. And just to understand the scale of how we transfer natural resources into trash, like, for example, each year, the mass of plastic thrown away
we had a
is
show on
more
that,
than
actually.
the mass of the population of Earth.
Yes,
right?
we did. We had a show on that. Actually, we had a show on the trash society. But I want to ask you about something else here. So, because, you know, there's a difference between climate change and climate disaster. And you mentioned it a little bit. So when we talk about climate change, I think the pollution is one thing, the pollution, how we use the resources, etc. But can we really say on the one hand that we need to, the consumerism is at fault when we say at the other hand that only 0.04% comes actually from the CO2? Anna?
Это очень объемное.
So this is actually a very important topic and very relevant topic. CO2 does not have to do anything with the climate change on planet Earth, the emissions of CO2. And this is very important that we need to know about that. And a little bit later on today, we will uncover this topic in more detail. CO2 emissions that humans make, you know, it's like a very, very, very little part. No, I don't say that like we do not pollute the atmosphere. Of course, we have production pollutions that basically influence the defensive functions of the atmosphere, right? But CO2 emissions is like a PR company, like a PR agenda that is used to make money. And in more detail, you know, if you want to understand what is the mechanism of the climate change on the planet, like we do not say that the climate is not changing. No, it is changing, but we're just saying that it is not connected with the anthropogenic CO2 emissions. In terms of ecology and environment, we have a lot of other problems, but they're like secondary comparing to a huge threat, climatic threat of climate change that we face.
I don't think at this point there is any question that the climate is changing. I don't think at this point there's any question that we are exploiting resources beyond what is there. So I think for our viewers, I do want to go for very, very briefly, because I know this is a huge argument and I think most people probably will never settle in an either or. There are some, because there's too much push about there's the CO2 and the others say, no, it's not the CO2 and there are other reasons. And maybe Elisabetta can probably give us also a background on this. I want to have a very, very brief, concise description of what other reasons are that are actually more dominant than the CO2, and then we come back to the CO2 in a moment. Elizabeth, can you give us just a few other reasons as to what actually affects the climate change and why are we saying the climate is changing?
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Today, our planet basically is in the middle of the cycle of cataclysms, and different cycles of climate change are well known from climatology, geology, but currently the cycle that we're entering right now is the cycle of cataclysms. It is equal to 12,000 years, and it is connected with the critical change in the planet's core as a result of cosmic interaction, cosmic radiation that influences the course of all planets of the solar system. And it is interesting that the same kind of climate change occurs on other planets of the solar system. And the heating up of the atmosphere that we see right now is connected with the heat that comes from the middle from the inside of the planet. And this is due to the fact that the core of the planet is in disbalance, and which causes the rise of magma, which heats up the Earth's crust, which heats up the atmosphere. And with that being done, the temperature rises, and this causes the increase in seismic and volcanic activity. The floods number are increasing because, and it happens because magma, while rising, evaporates the water and falls down on Earth with lots of rains. And right now, magma is heating up the ocean from the bottom, from below, and due to that, the stream flow of the water in the ocean increases. Also, this causes the number of hurricanes, which is also increasing. And just as Anna said, this is a natural cycle, but it is catastrophic. And the examples of such catastrophic changes we can see in the currents of ice and in geological sediments. And basically, this cycle of catastrophes we're entering at, in the point of time when these cataclysms will increase in geometrical progression.
Yeah, but these are then basically things that we can't change. And here's what I'm getting with this, because I hear all the time these things like stop climate change. So I come from a change and transformation background, organizational change, so I focus on change processes. Change is a constant, so whenever a process is going, you cannot stop, really, an ongoing process and go back. Just as people say, like, you can't really get just a little bit pregnant, right? You go all the way or you don't. And even if you interrupt it, the change process has already started. So when you have a change process, we know there's climate change, there are things that are just happening. We know there are some things where we can do something, which means stop the pollution, because that is simply what actually respect for the earth and common sense would dictate to all of us if you need clean air and clean water, etc. But then I want to get to a little bit as to the fact of what we then can do, where to adapt, and where we have to really just see, things are changing, and to some degree you have to embrace it. So based on where we are, things would increase, you say. What would it look like by, let's say, 2050, if you can? Can you give us a sort of like a spec? Do we still have landmass left by then?
Unfortunately, I can say that there will be no landmass by 2050. And all the predictions that include all the analyses, they say that we have only 14 years to come, and we cannot adapt to this cycle. We cannot find some safe territories on the planet Earth. We cannot wait it out in bunkers. This cycle will be of such destruction that the planet has never faced before. And this is connected directly with what Anna was talking about, the fact that we as humans influenced the environment of the planet, the immunity of the planet. The cycle of cataclysm that we are entering is 12,000 years.
Researchers believe that this cyclicity is galactic in nature. That is, it is related to the rotation cycle of the galaxy. Every 12,000 years, radiation from the center of the universe affects the solar system and even influences the sun. In 1998, not only was the Earth's core recorded jumping, but also those of the moon, the sun, and other planets. In recent decades, scientists began to record drastic climate changes on all planets and satellites of the solar system. An increase in the number of giant storms and hurricanes, abnormal temperatures, an increase in volcanic and seismic activity. Now, an increased flux of cosmic radiation due to the low activity of the sun is detected on Earth. Scientists have found evidence that a similar bombardment by cosmic rays occurred 12,500 years ago. In addition, every 12,000 years, an unknown flow of violent cosmic energy from the center of the universe comes to our planet. This high-energy impact occurs at the micro level and has enormous potential to trigger a shift of the planet's core. Galactic radiation disrupts the life cycles of the biosphere. Trees begin to massively emit more carbon dioxide, whereas swamps emit compounds of deadly gases. This time, Earth may become another dead planet, just like Mars. The planet's immune system is now destroyed by the toxins that our technogenic civilization has excreted. The planet's diseased organism might not survive the enormous stresses which cyclicity creates every 12,000 years. Every 24,000 years, disasters are even more devastating, since the solar system gets closer to the radiation from the center of the universe. We are now getting into this point of the near interaction. The planet is living its last years, and so are we, if we remain idle.
But every 24,000 years, this cycle is more destructive, more powerful. And right now, it is this, this kind of destruction, this cycle. Okay. And we cannot adapt to it, but there is a way out and there is a solution. And in order to survive through this, period of changes, we need the unification of scientists, but not just regular scientists. We need the genius people of the world. But these people, these scientists, these bright people right now are involved in secret laboratories, because this is the interest of the government, so that they could, create weapons and things like that.
I agree with you on the collaboration and unity to the extent possible of scientists. I don't think that just from the physical component we'll be able to solve that, but that's purely coming from a manifestation process, because manifestation always starts from the spiritual and ends up in the physical, not the other way around, ever, never the other way around. But I do want to pick this up here a moment, because time is flying, and I want to so we've established the climate change, we've established the problem with the climate, the disasters. We've established that there's more floodings, more wildfires, etc. I want to move gear here for a moment and talk about us, where we currently are, and look at where we as humanity, where we sit today. So when you look at, right now we have this huge polarity, this finger pointing, this blaming, this, I'm right, you're wrong, all this stuff. And we the people sometimes the people also start sitting in chairs where we start acting on raw emotion. So I want to talk a little bit from the psychological point of view, where we're actually currently at and why we're so stuck in there. So Paulina, I want to bring in you on this one as a psychologist, and I'm going to ask you point blank, are we having collective Stockholm syndrome?
Lives of people predominate patterns of accumulation and multiplication of money, property, real estate, unlimited right of their preservation and transfer by inheritance.
But I don't think that's a psychological issue, though. I think this is more an attitude of how you see it, but I don't hear the psychological reasoning in terms of how our brains are affected through that or how our souls are affected by that. I'm gonna push you back here a little bit on this one because it sounds more like this is all the consumerism is just the culprit, and I don't think that's true at all. I think what's happening is something that's much deeper on a psychological level to keep people in the reptilian brain, in the lower brain. Consumerism doesn't keep you in the lower brain, but being targeted, for example, with advertisement that makes you that only goes in your brainstem and it kind of gets you right there to make a fight or flight decision, that's a psychological impact. Okay, let's move on here for a second. I'll come back to that one. Let's move on to the world economy. So actually, Talia, I'm going to call on you on this one because I know you watch trends, you watch the globe. Talk to us in terms of the world economy. What are we looking at?
Yeah, well, thank you, Nicolette. It's a great pleasure to be here. And of course, we're looking at the crisis right now. And one of the reasons of the crisis is that we lack in energy, reliable sources of energy. Energy becomes expensive. That drives all the prices and everything. It goes up. It becomes much more expensive for regular people to live. And right now we're facing the climate change. Of course, the climate is changing, no doubt about it. And making a bet on weather-dependent sources of energy during the period of climate change doesn't make any sense, even from logical perspective. Now, we can get to how money being spent, which are supposed to go on green energy and so on, like, for example, CO2 capturing facilities, which captured only 0.2% of projected amounts, despite capturing 100% of budget money that were allocated on them. And the whole thing about the agenda of not, like, the whole agenda about the CO2, fighting the climate change, it's not about making people's lives better. It's about fighting CO2 at any cost. And the whole concept of fighting CO2 is based on one graph, one so-called scientific study by one scientist from 1998 called the hockey stick graph, which was proven to be false. It was a falsified data for the unknown scientist to get some fame out of it.
Yeah.
We know it from the emails, and we know that IPCC by United Nations were aware that this graph wasn't true, but they were pushing scientists to agree to say that we have this consensus on this graph, and they were forcing scientists to hide all the inconvenient data, which wasn't backing up their political agenda. And political agenda was to introduce more taxations and make more money on fighting CO2, because the previous fighting against freon gas for the sake of ozone layer was already done. So they needed a new money-making scheme worldwide. And this is what we are facing right now. We are facing economical consequences of not well thought through politics, and also huge political division. We don't have unity. As you said, it all comes from the spiritual manifestation. And when it comes to our world, well, there has to be a vision of a positive outcome of where we're heading, where we're aspiring to. And right now we just let in some crazy egomaniacs to tear our world apart and just spend our money on wars, which makes no sense. It's a huge division.
Yeah.
All this money that are going on, finding new ways to destroy people across the world, they could as well go to make this beautiful new scientific discoveries to make our world safer. But I don't see that happening for some reason.
Yeah, and I want to mention also something here for our viewers, because, you know, when we talk about the world economy, everybody goes by data. Very few know what those data really mean. But I want to give you a nutshell here, because the 5 largest economies, when you look at them, so you have the United States, you have China, Japan, Germany, and UK. Fact of the matter is they are all deeply in trouble. So the 5 top economies already are really facing issues that we haven't. I know for Germany, we haven't faced issues anything like this since World War II. When you look at the United States, we have a debt to GDP ratio of 124%. So completely over indebted. No one can ever pay this back. So we know the systems are really in line economically on track for collapsing. And I just just read actually yesterday that even the US housing market, surprise, surprise, is apparently developing negatively faster than ever anticipated. Of course, actually, anyone who was looking at the writings on the wall could have seen that coming earlier instead of trying to keep the bubble up and basically make everyone be confident in an economy that's eroding, and we all feel it. I think we're already feeling it. I mean, we see it in grocery stores, etc. We see it in shipments not coming in supply chain disruptions. We see it in not paper available for printing brochures, for example, even for as much as a holiday catalog or something. There are shortages of almost everywhere when you look in a specific way. But since we were talking, and we seem to come back to the CO2, Anna, I want to ask you something. Plants need CO2 to produce oxygen, right? So couldn't one also argue that because we have more people, we need more oxygen, and therefore actually not just more plants, but that they will also need more CO2?
Вы затронули очень интересную
You
тему.
touched upon a very interesting topic. From one point of view, yes, there is a correlation, the function that forests and swamps are like the natural filters. They basically absorb CO2 and produce oxygen. But currently, probably the main topic of today's conversation is climate change, but we see that the paradox that due to some internal processes taking place inside the Earth, which Lisa Kromova mentioned today, the planet is experiencing such situations that basically scientists, they already state that forests and swamps kind of like turn on another mechanism. They produce CO2 in much more proportions than oxygen. And this is indeed a very interesting fact, an observation that needs a more detailed study. And if we take a look at the, topic of forests, in detail, of course, this is a protection mechanism. This is the system that could have helped us to kind of weaken the power of climatic disasters and climate change in general, but currently due to our human activity, due to the fact that we are not taking care about today and not taking care about tomorrow fate of us, we cut down the forests and stuff like that, we lose those forests in a catastrophic pace, and this protective function that was supposed to help us cope with the disasters basically does not do any good right now. It just has no power to do it.
Yeah, that also means, and just for our viewers to know, to put this in context, that also means that deplenished soil, by the way, cannot, so basically loses the capability, right, to act as a buffer between water and floods, correct? So if we only have sand and no soil, then we lose the ability to actually help us as a protector against the rising water and the floods. Because it can't absorb it, right? Sand cannot absorb as much as soil. Yes?
Действительно, леса.
Yes. Basically, forests have this unique function. They have a very, very deep root system, and thanks to this root system, the trees can keep the water in the soil, and thanks to that, they kind of like absorb the rest of the water. So if we don't have the forest, the soil is kind of like, I can say, naked, right? And all these floods happen because there's too much water, like basically, of course, this influences also the climate is changing as a cyclical process, but the thing is that it increases the climatic and natural disasters that we already have. Also, forests are like a buffer on the way of hurricanes and storms that we observe all over the world. And basically, forests, they lower they cannot stop, but they lower the power and the speed of the hurricane winds. You know, I can talk for hours about the mango forests because they are like a natural buffer from tsunamis because they grow like on the coasts. And they have a lot of functions. And if to talk about briefly, it's like the circulation of water. It's like a buffer from tsunami and hurricanes. It's also droughts. How strange it wouldn't sound, but the forests, they kind of distribute the water inside the soil. They also are one of the factors that influences the creation of clouds, right? So basically, while cutting down the forests and trees, we're not just losing the beauty of our nature, right? We lose the protective functions that planet Earth has. And due to the fact that these protective functions don't work, don't operate right now, they increase the climatic disasters that has basically apocalyptic, catastrophic, trend.
Right.
Just think about it. We have 5 to 6 years of stable climate that will basically allow us to do something, to change something. And this is not enough. And, in order to fix the environmental issues, we need not just 5 or 10 years. We need the long-term technologies, that would work in stages. And of course, we need to save ecology, but an environment, but this is the first test that we need to do after solving the climate problem. And I sincerely hope that people who hear this information would do their research, would study it, and look on the internet, and will find and understand what is really going on right now, and wake up. And start to see all these changes and start to act.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the choices now that we can make. So I want to shift, we have about 10 minutes left, so I want to talk about choices. What are our choices and what are our options? So we talked about, we have about 5 to 7 years left. What would need to happen in those 5 to 7 years? I don't know if either Elisabetta wants to take that or you, Anna, one of you goes. What would need to happen what would you say are immediate changes? Immediate. What would we need to do?
We need to create conditions in society so that there would be no wars, and so that all the brightest people of planet Earth, all the brightest scientists could be united in one team who will search for solution on how to fix the issue with radiation, which influences the planet's core. And we already know that since 1998-95, there is the radiation which influences the planet's core, which has the physical nature, but currently we are not at the stage of development of the science that knows how to fix it, how to interact with it. We know that it's not radio waves, it's not electromagnetic waves, it's not neutrino, but this is something like a quantum entanglement thing, and this is physics, which means that we will be able to understand how to counteract this influence, right? Before we enter the point of bifurcation, the point of no going back. Until that time, we have 5-6 years to unite the scientific potential, unite the brightest scientists of the world so that they could understand how to stop this influence, how to stabilize the core. And of course, after that, the cataclysms by inertia will continue, but they will be not as destructive as we actually
But I think
there will.
But here I think is a problem. When we say we need to wait until the brightest scientists unite, and don't get me wrong, but who defines who's the brightest scientist and who isn't? So that's kind of like what some already have tried, and what the other side would argue, that we have the brightest scientists. There are even some who go as so far as, in the United Nations, they claim they own the science.
We partnered with Google, for example. If you Google climate change, you will, at the top of your search, you will get all kinds of UN resources. So we're becoming much more proactive. We own the science.
So when we go down that slope, I think it's a very slippery slope. I think when you look more at, when we look at, what it takes to have the conditions, a world without war, yeah, but I think that also, the most important part is very highly developed spiritual beings that really are totally in peace with themselves and the self in who they are, so that they stop blaming and fighting and taking all their things out on somebody else, which really are things that are going on. So there are a couple of, there are several reasons I think we need to look into, but I think at the end we're always going to be thrown back to ourselves in terms of that's the fastest starting point for anything. We can try to unite, of course, but do we really? I mean, what's a world without war ever? That has never existed in history. Never. I think it can be when we're all fully developed human beings, but can we put a time frame on there? I don't know. That depends on every single one. But I want to go, so we talk about bringing more science together from a physical point of view, and a broader approach, I take that, right? We understand a little bit that it's the development of the individual, and I do want to bring Paulina back here for a second from a psychological point of view. So can you talk to us, Paulina, in terms of what would need to happen in our brain so that we can let go of where we are right now with our mental issues and psychological issues and focus more on creating a future?
We see it in politics, in economics, in every sphere of our life. Form the opinion that what we are living today, we can't change. We need to create a society and conditions for new generations coming into this world to understand the main meaning of life.
Yeah, but that's all abstract. The creating a society for new things is all abstract. I want to get to more, like, what does that mean for the individual? So when you are an individual today, what does that mean for you as an individual? For me, for example, for our viewers. Not in abstract terms, creating a society that sounds very, yes, there's a point to it, but it sounds also utopian, but break it down to what that means for an individual. Like, what would you tell your daughter, or what would you tell, if you have one, I don't know, or what would you tell other people in terms of psychologically to get past from where we are to where we want to go?
I want to give an example, for example, of elephant, pequeño. See,
yes.
If there is a small elephant,
yeah.
And if we, for example, take this little elephant, and we bind him to a tree. When this elephant grows, it has no chance to escape the situation, only because he got used to the situation and thinks that this is okay, this is normal, and he can't change anything. So this is how we are living today. And when we see something that can give us so many good things that can change everything, we don't believe that it is possible, because in mass media, in politics, and so on, so we only hear and see lies.
So what you're saying is, and only
few years that we started to talk the truth.
So what you're saying is, though, when you have the little elephant, you basically need to untie him from the tree so he can discover new conditions and new possibilities. So in other words, you got to liberate your mind to really focus on the bigger picture. We're almost out of time, so I want to bring Tali back on here for a second. Summarize for us, please, in terms of what would you like to see happen for the changes we would need to make?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, as you said, there are no, not even economical, but mathematical math models of actually solving the debt problem worldwide. There is a huge debt and nobody's talking about it. It's like it's almost normalized. How about we get all the best economists around the world, put them at the table and say, guys, let's figure out how do we solve this problem.
But aren't the economists the one who got us into trouble in the first place?
And bring real scientists, not those grant recipients like we know who work by United Nations, who only interested in receiving grants. No, we're talking about people who are actually computer scientists. Can you build a computer model of inflation-free economy? Why is nobody doing that? Why is nobody besides creative societies bringing up this topic? How do we build economies that would benefit each person, that would provide each person with universal basic income, universal basic housing, free education, free healthcare? Can we do this economically? Let's bring this question. Let's see how can we solve it. And just to show you how much of backlash this will receive from leftist media, I want to show you an example of Jim Bridenstine, who was nominated as an administrator of NASA in 2017. He said, well, once I become the head of NASA, I'm gonna put all the resources to study climate change on Mars, to see what happened over there and how to avoid a similar scenario happening on Earth. Why Mars lost its magnetic field and so on. Exactly what Elizabeth was talking about. And can you imagine, in 2018, when US Senate confirmed him, he absolutely flip-flopped 180 degrees and said he's not interested in that anymore. And all the leftist media praised him as a climate scientific hero.
I would love to debate this topic with you one day about universal basic income, which, by the way, I'm completely against. That's number one. So I would love to debate it. I don't think that's going to solve anything, but I hear your point. I do think the approaches are different. I think there is definitely, I think what most people agree, and I want to make this particular point also in this episode, because we've had so many people from different countries with different opinions, also from, even I mentioned at the beginning, Tali is a background, he's originally from the Ukraine. We also had Elisabetta, who's from Russia, which shows that we, the people, war is not a people thing. We, the people, can actually focus on talking to one another and focusing on how we make things work once we take the powers to be structures out of the equation. I think that's the one thing that maybe we can all take from that. I do want to continue this dialogue because I think there's still a lot of things we need to talk about, for example, what's economically a good foundation. Thanks so much for joining us, all of you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
For this episode. Thank you so much for watching. As you can see, the one thing I think we all agree on, things cannot continue the way they have, and we really have to start looking for solutions on local level, on a larger level as people, and also across borders as nations to sort of come together. But the main thing is always it should be people to people versus other hierarchical structures. How to do this, we're going to continue to explore. In the meantime, I hope you get to think about it a little bit as well. Feel free to share your input, to share your thoughts, to share your opinions. Best, of course, on my Twitter handle @DeVidar. You can also do it on Facebook. And I hope we see you next week. Have a wonderful week. Good night.